The 100th answer. The blood test results trembled in Elena Vasquez's hands as she stood in the sterile white hallway of St. Catherine's Hospital terminal. The word echoed through her mind like a death knell. 6 months, maybe less. At 27 years old, with a rare blood disorder that only 3 experimental treatments in the world could address, she was staring at her own mortality. And the cruelest irony. The only company developing the treatment that could save her life was Blackwood Industries, owned by the very man whose marriage proposal she had rejected 4 hours ago. Daniel Blackwood had proposed to 99 women over the past 3 years. It was public knowledge, fodder for tabloids and late-night comedy shows. The billionaire CEO with everything money could buy except genuine love. Every woman had said yes to his fortune, his power, his devastatingly handsome face. Every single one. Until Ilana walked into his office that morning as a temporary legal consultant, and, when he impulsively asked her to dinner, then inexplicably proposed over coffee, she had looked into his steel gray eyes and uttered the word no one ever told Daniel Blackwood: no. Now, clutching medical papers that sentenced her to death, Elena realized the universe had a twisted sense of humor. She needed him. And he needed to never know why. If you're already hooked by Elena's impossible situation, hit that like button and subscribe because this story is about to take turns you won't see coming. Daniel sat in his corner office on the 47th floor of Blackwood Tower, Manhattan's most prestigious address, and he couldn't focus on a single document before him. The merger papers. The quarterly reports. The acquisition proposal worth $2 billion. All of it blurred into meaningless static. All he could see was her face, those striking green eyes that held secrets he desperately wanted to unlock, that silky dark hair cascading over fair shoulders, the way her perfect lips had formed that devastating syllable, no. His assistant Margaret had worked for him for 15 years. She had never seen him like this. Sir, the board meeting starts in 10 minutes, she said carefully. Cancel it. Cancel the sir, this is the Singapore deal. 3 years of negotiations. Daniel swiveled his chair to face the floor, to ceiling windows overlooking the city. Somewhere out there among those millions of lives, was the woman who had looked at everything he represented and found it worthless. Find her, he said quietly. Elena Vasquez. I want to know everything. Margaret hesitated. Is this appropriate, sir? Daniel turned back and for the first time in 15 years, Margaret saw something vulnerable beneath his armor of confidence. I don't know what it is, Margaret. But I need to understand. What Margaret's investigation uncovered over the next 48 hours made Daniel's obsession deepen into something far more dangerous: genuine concern. Elena wasn't just a brilliant legal mind who had graduated top of her class from Columbia Law despite working 3 jobs. She wasn't just the woman who had spent her 20s caring for her dying mother instead of building the career she deserved. She was also currently drowning in medical debt from that caregiving, living in a cramped studio apartment in Brooklyn, and had just been seen leaving the oncology department of St. Catherine's Hospital. The last piece of information made Daniel's heart stop. Elena, meanwhile, was running out of time in more ways than one. Her temporary contract with Blackwood Industries was set to end in 3 days. The experimental treatment program required a recommendation from someone within the company, a cruel bureaucratic requirement that meant she'd have to interact with Daniel again. And Victor Harrington, Daniel's ruthless rival and former business partner, had just offered her a permanent position at his competing firm. Take the job. Her best friend Rosa urged over the phone. Harrington's offering 3 times what you're making now. You need the money for treatment. You don't understand. Elena paced her tiny apartment, medical bills spread across her bed like accusations. Victor Harrington is the reason Daniel's company exists in the first place. Daniel bought out Harrington's shares when Harrington was caught in an insider trading scandal. Harrington has spent 5 years trying to destroy Blackwood Industries from the outside. If I work for him, I become a weapon against Daniel. Against the man who proposes to strangers. The man with 99 ex-fiancées. Elena, you don't owe him anything. But Elena remembered Daniel's eyes when she'd said no. The flash of something that looked almost like relief beneath the shock. As if he'd been testing whether anyone would ever see him as more than his bank account, and she'd somehow passed. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Ms. Vasquez, this is Daniel Blackwood. Don't hang up. Her heart hammered. How did you get this number? I own a telecommunications company. A pause. That sounded more stalker-ish than I intended. I promise I'm not. Look, can we meet? Coffee. Public place. I just want to talk. We talked. I said no. I know. That's what I want to talk about. Against every instinct screaming at her to protect herself, Elena agreed. They met at a small cafe in Greenwich Village, far from the prying eyes of business reporters and society photographers. Daniel arrived first, looking almost uncomfortable in casual clothes, a simple gray sweater that somehow cost more than Elena's monthly rent, dark jeans that emphasized his athletic build. He stood when she entered, and his face transformed with an emotion Elena couldn't name. "You came," he said. "I'm still not marrying you." She slid into the booth across from him, deliberately keeping the table between them. "I wouldn't expect you to." A stranger proposing marriage over his second cup of coffee is clinically insane behavior. His self-deprecating smile caught her off guard. "I've been told I have issues with impulse control when I see something I want." "Is that what I am? Something you want?" The vulnerability returned to his eyes. "I don't know what you are, Elena. That's the terrifying part. I've spent 34 years knowing exactly what I want and how to get it. Buildings, companies, deals, people. They all follow predictable patterns. But you looked at me like you could see straight through the expensive suit to something worth rejecting. Maybe I just don't want to be wife number 100 on your collection list." It wasn't about collecting. Daniel leaned forward, and Elena caught his scent, something expensive but subtle like him. "Every proposal was a test. I wanted to find someone who saw me, not my money." 99 women saw dollar signs. "You saw. What did you see, Elena?" The question hung between them. Elena should have lied. Should have given him the answer that would push him away safely. Instead, the truth slipped out. "I saw someone just as lonely as me." If this moment between them is giving you chills, drop a comment about what you think Elena should tell Daniel next. Your engagement means everything to this channel. The chemistry between them was undeniable after that confession. Over the following week, Daniel found excuse after excuse to work with her on cases that didn't technically require his involvement. Elena found herself staying late, debating legal strategies that turned into debates about philosophy, art, terrible reality television, and the merits of pineapple on pizza. "Absolutely not," Elena declared one evening, cross-legged on his office couch with a stack of contracts. "Pineapple is a fruit. It doesn't belong on savory food. You're discriminating against fruits based on their sweetness." Daniel's grin was infuriating. "This is fruit prejudice. Fruitus, if you will. If you ever say fruitus again, I'm walking out of this building forever." "You can't leave. You're contractually obligated to appreciate my terrible sense of humor for." He checked his watch. "Another 72 hours. Elena's stomach dropped. 72 hours until her contract ended. 72 hours until she'd have no legitimate reason to see him. 72 hours until she'd have to make a decision about Victor Harrington's offer. Daniel noticed her shift in mood. "Hey. What just happened?" "Nothing, long day." He set down his papers and moved to sit beside her on the couch. Not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Elena. Talk to me. We barely know each other. I know you take your coffee with exactly 2 sugars and a splash of oat milk. I know you hum when you're concentrating on complex documents. I know you check your phone compulsively around 3 p.m. every day, and your face goes pale when you see the notifications. I know you're terrified of something, and you're too stubborn to let anyone help you." Tears pricked her eyes. "Those are just observations. Those are me paying attention to the only person who's made me feel something real in years." He reached out, hesitant, and tucked a strand of her silky dark hair behind her ear. "Whatever you're facing, you don't have to face it alone." Alana nearly told of everything in that moment. The diagnosis, the treatment, the insurance company that had denied her claim 3 times. Victor Harrington's offer and the terrible strings attached. But before she could speak, Daniel's phone exploded with notifications. He glanced at the screen and his face went white. "Daniel, what is it?" "It's my mother." His voice cracked. "She's been in an accident." He was gone in seconds, leaving Elena alone in his office with a half-finished conversation and a heart that ached in ways she hadn't allowed in years. Farst magen ia par. What Elena discovered on Daniel's desk while alone in his office changed everything. A folder marked, Vaeski, Eliefel, containing her complete medical records, her financial history, and a signed recommendation letter for the experimental treatment program, dated 2 days before they'd first met. He had known everything before he ever proposed. And she had no idea if that made him her savior or her enemy. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Daniel's mother, Victoria Blackwood, was the only person in the world who had ever truly loved him unconditionally. His father had been a tyrant, a man who measured his son's worth in quarterly earnings. Daniel had spent 20 years trying to earn affection from a man who was constitutionally incapable of giving it, and when his father finally died 3 years ago, Daniel had inherited an empire and an emotional void that 99 proposals couldn't fill. But his mother had always seen him. The real him. The boy who cried at sad movies and rescued stray dogs and donated anonymously to children's hospitals. The man who kept his father's company running not because he loved business, but because thousands of families depended on those jobs. Victoria was conscious when Daniel arrived, which was the first relief. A car accident on the way to her charity luncheon. Broken ribs, fractured arm, concussion. Serious but not life-threatening. You look terrible, Victoria said, her voice weak but her wit intact. Did you forget to buy another company today? Very funny. Daniel collapsed into the chair beside her bed. You scared me. I scared myself. These New York drivers are animals. She studied her son's face with the perceptiveness that had made her the secret power behind Blackwood Industries for decades. But something else is troubling you. Something that has nothing to do with my little fender bender. It was hardly little. Daniel. Talk to your mother. And so he told her. About Alina. About the proposal she'd rejected. About the week they'd spent orbiting each other. About the connection he felt that defied logic or explanation. About the medical records he'd obtained through ethically questionable channels, and the treatment recommendation he'd written hoping to save a woman he barely knew. Victoria listened without interruption. When he finished, she said simply, You love her. I barely know her. You know her, Daniel. You just told me things about her that you've never noticed about anyone. The question isn't whether you love her. The question is whether you're brave enough to love her honestly. I've been lying to her. I knew about her illness before I ever approached her. Did you approach her because of her illness? No. The answer was immediate. I approached her because when she walked into my office, she looked at me like I was just another person. Not Daniel Blackwood, billionaire. Just Daniel. And then she opened her mouth and argued with me about contract law for 20 minutes. And I realized I would give anything to spend the rest of my life being challenged by that mind. Victoria smiled despite her pain. Then tell her the truth. All of it, and hope she loves you enough to forgive you. Back in Daniel's office, Elena sat frozen with the folder in her hands. Her first instinct was rage hot, betraying fury at being investigated like a business acquisition. He had known she was dying. He had known she was drowning in debt. He had manipulated her from the very first moment. But then she read the recommendation letter again. It was beautifully written, passionate in its advocacy for her treatment. It detailed her qualifications with the precision of someone who had genuinely researched her life, not just her vulnerabilities. And it was dated before they'd ever met. Which meant he'd written it purely because he'd seen her file and wanted to help. Before he knew her name. Before he saw her face. Before she had any power to give him anything in return. Why? The question burned. Her phone rang. Victor Harrington's name flashed on the screen. Es Vasquez. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad moment. What do you want, Mr. Harrington? Straight to business. I like that about you. His voice was smooth, cultured, and somehow reptilian. I wanted to inform you that the offer I made is time sensitive. I need an answer by midnight tonight. Or I'll be forced to share some interesting information with certain pharmaceutical companies about Daniel Blackwood's practice of obtaining confidential medical records of employees and associates. Information that traditionally and professionally and personally. Elena's blood ran cold. You've been spying on him. I've been protecting my interests. Daniel took everything from me, Elena. My company, my reputation, my place in society. He painted me as a criminal while his own hands were far from clean, and now I have proof of his illegal activities. Unless you help me. Help you how? I have a hearing before the SEC next month. Testimony from a legal expert of your caliber, with your particular knowledge of Blackwood Industries' inner workings, could be very valuable. Work for me, and I'll ensure your silence about Daniel's activities. Your treatment will be funded privately. Everyone wins. Except Daniel. Daniel destroyed himself the moment he chose to break the law to help a stranger. I'm simply ensuring justice is served. Elena's mind raced. Harrington was right about one thing: what Daniel had done was illegal. Obtaining her medical records without consent was a serious violation of privacy laws. If it came out, his company could face massive lawsuits, regulatory scrutiny, criminal charges. Everything he'd built could crumble. But he'd done it to save her life. I need time to think, she said. You have until midnight. After that, my lawyers will be very busy. The line went dead. If you're on the edge of your seat right now, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. You'll want to see how this unfolds. Elena didn't go home. Instead, she went to St. Catherine's Hospital, following her instinct to face another impossible situation. She found Daniel in the waiting room outside his mother's room, head in his hands, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. How is she? Elena asked softly. Daniel looked up and relief flooded his features. She'll be okay. Couple months of recovery, but she's strong. He stood reaching for her. Lena, I need to tell you something. I know. His face fell. You found the folder. I found everything. The medical records. The recommendation letter. Victor Harrington called me 20 minutes ago and told me the rest. Daniel's expression shifted from guilt to alarm. Harrington, what did he want? He wants me to testify against you. He says he has proof of everything you did to get my information. He's planning to destroy you, Daniel, and he's giving me until midnight to decide if I'm going to help him. The color drained from Daniel's face. Elena, why? She stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. Why did you do it? You didn't know me. I was a name on a file. Why risk everything to help a stranger? For a long moment Daniel was silent. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. When I was 22, my father was dying. Cancer. The same kind that's killing you, actually. I finally got him into the program 3 days before he died. He paused, his jaw tight with remembered pain. It was too late. He died hating me and I couldn't save him. And when I saw your file, when I saw another person dying from the same disease while insurance companies played God with paperwork, I couldn't let it happen again. It wasn't about you specifically at first. It was about me not being helpless. About saving someone, anyone. And then Daniel's hand came up to cup her face, and Alina let him. And then you walked into my office and told me I was wrong about contract interpretation, and suddenly it became very specifically about you. Sakat Majoar of Houndar. Before Alina could respond, hospital security burst into the waiting room with devastating news. Victoria Blackwood had taken a sudden turn, internal bleeding they'd missed in the initial assessment. She was being rushed into emergency surgery. And the last thing she'd said before losing consciousness was Elena's name, along with a secret about Daniel's past that could change everything about who Elena thought he was. The next 3 hours were the longest of Elena's life. She sat beside Daniel in the surgical waiting room, watching him come apart at the seams with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned long ago never to show weakness. His phone rang constantly, board members, investors, media outlets who had somehow gotten wind of his mother's accident. He answered none of them. Tell me about her, Elena said finally, breaking the heavy silence. Daniel's laugh was hollow. What do you want to know? Everything. Anything. Tell me who I'm waiting to meet. The distraction technique worked. Daniel began to talk, and as he spoke, a picture emerged of a woman who had survived an abusive first marriage, rebuilt herself from nothing, and found unexpected love with the cold businessman who would become Daniel's father. Victoria had softened Edward Blackwood, given him a son, created a family out of sheer force of will. And when Edward had become harder and crueler in his later years, Victoria had secretly protected Daniel from the worst of his father's expectations. She told me once that loving someone difficult is still love. Daniel said quietly, that we don't get to choose who touches our hearts, only how we respond to that touch. She sounds wise. She's infuriating. She's manipulative in the best possible way. She probably orchestrated this entire thing, getting you into my office in the first place. She's been trying to find me someone real for years. Elena blinked. Your mother orchestrated my temporary contract. Victoria Blackwood sits on the hospital board that reviewed your treatment application. She sits on the company board that hired you for legal consultation. She's the one who put your file on my desk, knowing I would read it. Daniel shook his head, caught between admiration and exasperation. I shouldn't be surprised. She's been running my life from behind the scenes since I was born. So when you proposed, I didn't know any of that. I genuinely proposed because I was an impulsive idiot who saw a beautiful, brilliant woman and lost all rational thought. It was only later that I realized my mother's fingerprints were all over the situation. Elena should have been furious. Instead, she found herself laughing, a surprised, almost hysterical sound. Your mother tried to set us up by giving you my medical records. In her defense, she probably thought I'd approach it more sensitively. Dinner flowers. Normal human courtship rituals. Instead of proposing marriage over coffee. To be fair, it was very good coffee. Their laughter broke something between them, a wall of pretense that had kept them both safely distant. When it faded, Elena found herself leaning against Daniel's shoulder, his arm around her, the warmth of him grounding her in a moment that should have been terrifying. I'm dying, Daniel. I know. And you're probably going to prison for obtaining my medical records illegally. Also aware. This is objectively the worst possible time to start a relationship. Daniel pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I've been told I have issues with timing. Before Elena could respond, the surgeon emerged. Victoria Blackwood had survived. The bleeding had been stopped, the damage repaired. She would need months of recovery, but she would live. Daniel nearly collapsed with relief. Elena caught him, held him, let him lean on her the way he'd let her lean on him moments before. And in that moment she made a decision. "I'm not helping Harrington," she said. Daniel pulled back to look at her. "Elena, if you don't, he'll release everything. I could lose. Then we'll fight him together. I'm a lawyer, Daniel. A damn good one. And I'm not going to let a corporate snake destroy the man who tried to save my life. You're dying. You should be focused on treatment, not legal battles." Elena smiled, and for the first time in months, she felt something like hope. "I'm dying whether I fight or not. At least this way, I die doing something that matters." This moment of choosing love over fear is what stories are made of. Share this video with someone who needs to believe in fighting for what matters. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of legal strategy, medical appointments, and a romance that blossomed in the most unexpected circumstances. Elena formally joined Daniel's legal team, working openly on a case against Victor Harrington's attempted blackmail and extortion. Daniel funded her treatment privately, ensuring the program began immediately while they fought to reform the insurance system that had nearly killed her. They spent long nights in his office, working side by side, their banter becoming more playful as their defenses lowered. "You have terrible handwriting," Elena observed one evening, squinting at Daniel's notes. "I'm left-handed. We're a persecuted minority. You're a billionaire. You're about the least persecuted person on the planet," says the woman who literally argued before the Supreme Court last year. Elena looked up, surprised. "You know about that?" "I know everything about you, Elena. I've read every case you've ever worked, every paper you've ever published, every comment you've ever made on legal forums." He grinned at her expression. "You thought I was only obsessed with your medical records. That's actually kind of sweet. And terrifying. I prefer thorough." She threw a pencil at him. He caught it, holding her gaze with an intensity that made her breath catch. "When this is over," he said quietly, "when Harrington is dealt with and your treatment is working and my mother is back to meddling in my life full time, I'd like to take you on a real date." Define real date. Dinner at a restaurant that doesn't have files on the table. Maybe dancing. Definitely dessert. His voice softened. "And at the end of the night, if you're willing, I'd like to kiss you properly instead of staring at you across legal documents like a lovesick teenager." Elena's heart was hammering. "You've been wanting to kiss me since the moment you told me I was wrong about contract law. Something about intellectual combat really does it for me." She stood, walked around the desk and stopped directly in front of his chair. "We don't have to wait until it's over." The kiss that followed was everything Elena had refused to let herself want. His hands in her hair, her fingers gripping his sweater, his lips moving against hers with a tenderness that made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Daniel pressed his forehead against hers. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Elena Vasquez. I think I've been falling in love with you since the terrible coffee proposal." It was excellent coffee. She kissed him again to shut him up. But happiness, Elena had learned, was always temporary. 2 days before the hearing that would determine Harrington's fate, Elena's doctors delivered devastating news. The treatment wasn't working as hoped. Her body was rejecting the experimental medication. They would need to try a more aggressive approach, one that would require months of hospitalization, with no guarantee of success. Daniel found her crying in the hospital chapel at midnight, having slipped away from a working dinner without explanation. "Talk to me," he said, sitting beside her in the pew. "I'm scared." The words came out broken. "I've been so focused on fighting, on doing something meaningful, but I forgot I'm still dying. And now the thing that was supposed to save me might not work, and I have to spend whatever time I have left in a hospital room, and I'm scared, Daniel. I'm so scared." He held her while she cried, stroking her hair, murmuring words of comfort that couldn't fix anything but somehow helped anyway. "I can't promise you'll live," he said finally. "But I can promise you won't face this alone. Whatever happens, whatever treatment you need, I'll be there. Every day, every hour, you won't be alone in that room. You have a company to run. You can't sit in a hospital. Watch me." And he meant it. Over the next 2 months, Daniel Blackwood, the CEO who had never taken a vacation, who had run his empire with obsessive control, delegated everything. He appointed trusted executives to handle day-to-day operations. He sold 2 subsidiaries that had been demanding too much of his time. He restructured his entire life around being present for Elena's treatment. The business world was shocked. The tabloids went wild. "Billionaire abandons empire for mystery woman" became a trending topic. But Daniel didn't care. The hearing against Harrington, meanwhile, proceeded without him. Elena's carefully prepared case was argued by her colleague, a brilliant young attorney named Sarah Chen, who had become Elena's protégée over the past weeks. The evidence was overwhelming: Harrington's blackmail attempts, his history of corporate espionage, his previous insider trading conviction. He was found guilty on multiple counts and faced years of imprisonment. Elena watched the verdict from her hospital bed, Daniel holding her hand, a smile spreading across her pale face. "We won," she whispered. "You won. I just provided the funding." "We won," she insisted. Together. The treatment was brutal. There were days when Elena couldn't keep food down, when her hair fell out in clumps, when the pain was so intense she begged for it to end. There were nights when Daniel held her while she screamed, feeling more helpless than he ever had in his life. But there were also moments of light. Victoria Blackwood, recovered and irrepressible, became Elena's second mother, visiting daily with homemade soup and terrible gossip about society people Elena had never met. Rosa came every weekend, filling the room with laughter and stories from Elena's healthier days. Sarah Chen sent flowers and case updates, keeping Elena connected to the legal world she loved. And Daniel. Daniel was there every single day. He read to her when she was too weak to focus. He argued about politics when she had enough energy to fight back. He held her hand during the worst procedures and celebrated with champagne during the small victories. 5 months into treatment, the doctors delivered news that made Daniel fall to his knees in the hospital corridor. The aggressive approach was working. Elena's blood markers were improving, the disease was retreating. For the first time since her diagnosis, there was genuine hope for a full recovery. Elena, still pale and thin but with a new light in her eyes, looked at Daniel when he stumbled back into her room with tears streaming down his face. "Good news or bad news?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The best news." He climbed onto the bed beside her, pulling her into his arms as carefully as he'd ever held anything precious. "You're going to live, Elena, you're going to live." They held each other and cried, tears of relief, of joy, of all the fear they'd been holding back for months. 6 months later, Elena stood in a garden outside the Blackwood family estate, surrounded by flowers and friends and a future she had once been certain she'd never see. Her hair had grown back, shorter than before but thick and healthy. Her color had returned, her strength had rebuilt. She was alive in ways she hadn't known were possible. Daniel stood across from her in a simple gray suit, looking at her like she was the only person in the universe. Victoria watched from the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief embroidered with her initials. "I asked you a question once," Daniel said, his voice carrying across the garden. "In an office, over terrible coffee, with no understanding of who you were or what I was feeling. I asked wrong for all the wrong reasons, in absolutely the worst way possible." Laughter rippled through the guests. Elena smiled, her eyes already glistening. "Today I'm asking right. Elena Vasquez, I have watched you fight for your life with more courage than I've ever seen. I have watched you choose love when fear was easier, choose hope when despair was logical, choose me when you had every reason not to. I don't deserve you. I never have. But I will spend every day of my life trying to become worthy of the gift you've given me." He took her hands, his grip steady despite the emotion in his voice. "Will you marry me? Not because I'm rich, or powerful, or desperate, but because I love you more than I've ever loved anything, and I cannot imagine facing another day without you beside me." Alana looked at the man who had broken every rule to save her life, who had given up everything to hold her hand through darkness, who had seen her at her weakest and loved her anyway. "Nenti, 9 women said yes," she said. "Because I saw a billionaire. I said no because I saw a man hiding behind his money. But now I see someone who uses his power to protect the people he loves, who isn't afraid to be vulnerable, who showed me that even in the darkest moments, love is worth fighting for." She squeezed his hands, tears streaming freely down her face. "Yes, Daniel Blackwood. 1,000 times yes." The kiss that sealed their vows was witnessed by everyone who loved them, but it felt entirely private. A promise between two people who had found each other against impossible odds. At the reception, Victoria Blackwood raised a toast that silenced the room. "I have spent years," she said, "trying to find someone worthy of my son. I arranged meetings, manipulated circumstances, put files on desks." She paused for the laughter. "All in the hope that Daniel would find someone who could see past the Blackwood name to the man I raised." "Elena, you didn't just see past it. You looked at everything my son represents and demanded more. You challenged him. You fought beside him. You loved him not because of what he could give you, but because of who he is." She raised her glass toward the newlyweds. "To Elena and Daniel. May your love story remind everyone that the greatest treasures in life cannot be bought, only earned through courage, honesty, and the willingness to say no when ice is easier." As the guests drank, Elena leaned into Daniel's embrace, watching their friends and family celebrate. She planned this entire thing, didn't she? Elena murmured. Daniel laughed. She denies it to this day. And you believe her? Not for a second. He pressed a kiss to her temple. But I'm grateful. Every manipulation, every scheme, every folder on my desk, it all led to you. Elena turned in his arms, looking up at the man she had chosen against all logic and reason. I spent my whole life thinking love was a luxury I couldn't afford, she said. Something for people who weren't drowning in debt or fighting illness or too damaged to deserve happiness. You showed me I was wrong. Love isn't a luxury. It's survival. It's the thing that kept me fighting when treatment was unbearable. It's the reason I'm standing here today. Daniel pulled her close, holding her like she was his entire world. And you showed me that all the money in existence is worthless without someone real to share it with. That being alone at the top isn't strength, it's fear. That the bravest thing I've ever done wasn't building an empire. It was letting myself love you. The music swelled around them. Guests began to dance. Victoria was already plotting grandchildren with Rosa. And in the center of it all, two people who had found each other through pain and stubbornness and a proposal gone spectacularly wrong swayed together, oblivious to everyone except each other. Some love stories begin with instant attraction. Some begin with dramatic gestures. But the best love stories, the ones that last, begin with honesty, with vulnerability, with someone brave enough to say no to what's easy and yes to what's real. Elena and Daniel's story isn't just about a billionaire finding love. It's about two people discovering that true connection requires courage. It's about fighting for each other when giving up would be simpler. It's about building a future on trust instead of transaction. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Every click helps share this message of hope with someone who might need it. And remember, the right person won't ask you to be less than you are. They'll love you for saying no to everything that isn't worthy of you, and yes to the life you deserve. Because sometimes, being the 100th answer, the different answer, the honest answer, is exactly what makes a love story worth telling.